Have you ever picked up your phone, looked at an app, and just thought, wait a minute, that button wasn't there yesterday? You know for a fact you didn't hit update, but there it is. It's a weird feeling, almost like your phone is living a life of its own.
So let's get right into it. How on earth do your apps just change, seemingly on their own, without you ever touching the App Store? I promise you, it is not magic, and you are not going crazy. There's a really fascinating reason behind it all, and it opens up this hidden world that's running inside our devices, literally 24/7.
And hey, you're not alone in wondering about this. A user on Reddit, SavPen98, put it perfectly. They asked, how can these apps add features like this without me updating the app myself? They noticed new features, even new ads, popping up on apps like TikTok and Facebook, even though they had auto updates turned off. So what is going on here?
Well, this brings us to the first part of our mystery, what I'm calling the app's ghost update. We're going to pull back the curtain on this little digital magic trick.
So here's the secret. It's not actually an update in the way we usually think about it. Most of the time, the code for that new feature is already on your phone, just hidden. Companies use a few tricks to switch it on. First, they can use something called feature flags, which is basically a remote control to flip a switch and make a new feature appear. Or they might be doing A/B testing, where they only show the new feature to a small group of people to see how it goes. And finally, a lot of apps today are basically just fancy web browsers. They're a simple shell, and every time you open them, they just pull the latest version from a server.
All of this remote control stuff, all this behind-the-scenes action, is made possible by things that are constantly running on your phone, even when you're not using it. And that leads us to the invisible engines that power everything: background processes.
So, what is a background process? Well, the official definition is a process that runs behind the scenes without you having to do anything. You know, these are the little workers that are constantly checking for new emails, syncing your photos to the cloud, and, as we just learned, phoning home to a server to see if there are any new features to turn on.
I love this analogy. If your apps are the actors on stage, then background processes are the stage crew. They're the ones working quietly behind the curtain, moving the sets, checking the lights, and making sure everything is ready, so that when the curtain rises, when you open the app, the performance is flawless. And this is not just a phone thing, by the way. This is a fundamental concept in computing. If you're on a Windows computer, they're called Windows services. If you're on a Mac or a Linux machine, they have a cooler name: daemons. They are the invisible workhorses keeping all of our devices going. Okay, so this stage crew is essential, and it's always busy. But all of that constant work comes at a cost. A hidden cost that hits every single one of us, every day. And that is the hidden battery drain. I just want you to stare at this number for a second. 28.9%. That is a huge chunk of something you depend on every single day. The question is, what is it? And here's the answer. A massive study of over 2,000 phones found that 28.9% is the average slice of your phone's daily battery that is drained by background activity while the screen is turned off. Let that sink in for a moment. Nearly a third of your battery just vanishes when you're not even using your phone.
Just to be perfectly clear, we're not talking about the battery you use when you're scrolling Instagram or watching YouTube. No, this is the energy being consumed while your phone is sitting idle in your pocket or on your nightstand while you are fast asleep. The stage crew is working overtime, and they are draining your battery.
Which, of course, leads us to a really important question. If we're spending almost a third of our battery life on all this activity, is it actually useful? Is it doing anything for us? The researchers who figured this out came up with a brilliant way to measure it. They call it background to foreground correlation, or BFC for short. The idea is actually super simple. It just asks, after an app does some work in the background, do you then open that app? If so, great, that work was probably useful. But if not, then what was the point?
And what's so wild is that the answer is completely different for everyone. Let's take an app like Facebook. For user A, someone who checks it constantly, 90% of its background work is useful. They open the app right after it refreshes. But for user C, who barely uses it, only 10% of that same work is relevant to them. It's the same app, but the value is totally personal.
When you zoom out, the findings are just staggering. For many people, a full 60% of the apps running in the background had a usefulness score of 0, meaning the user never opened the app after it did its background thing. And get this, even for an app we think of as essential, like Gmail, 35% of users had a score of 0. A huge amount of our battery is being spent on things that are, for us, completely wasted effort.
So, if we can measure all this waste, can we stop it?
Absolutely. And that brings us to the solution, creating a much smarter way to handle background activity.
So the researchers built a system called Hush, and its logic is just beautiful. When an app wants to run in the background, Hush first checks when it last ran. If it's trying to run too often for an app you rarely use, Hush just tells it no and suppresses the activity. But here's the genius part. The moment you open that app yourself, the timer resets. The system learns, oh, okay, this app is important to you again. It's like a personal bouncer for your battery.
So what's the payoff? What happens when you manage things this intelligently? Well, let's look at one final number, 15.7%. That's it. That's the average amount of daily battery life people got back. By just cutting out the useless chatter from apps that weren't important to you, the system saved, on average, almost 16% of the total battery. We're talking hours of extra phone life, reclaimed from energy that was just being thrown away.
And the best part is, this isn't just a science experiment anymore. The ideas behind Hush are now being built directly into our phones. You have more control now than ever before. You can whitelist an app you need running all the time, or you can even adjust how aggressive the system is. You get to decide the perfect balance between having the freshest data and having the longest battery life. The control is finally in your hands.
So we started with a simple mystery about an app that updated itself, and we ended up uncovering this entire secret world of processes running constantly, and a lot of the time just wasting the battery that we all depend on. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What else is your phone doing when you're not looking?